Clippers, Clippers, Clippers. That's all you're going to hear about in this series, about how the Clippers are the biggest choke artists in NBA history, about how Paul George should be shipped off to China, about how Kawhi Leonard can't be comparable to LeBron James, about how Doc Rivers should be shipped off to China, Lou Will and Montrezl Harrell should be the water boys on that team. That's all we're going to hear about, and that's already proven true. Within an hour of the game, I've seen about 7 different videos from about 7 different channels talking about how the Clippers blew a 3-1 lead and how the Clippers are screwed for the future. And that's all well and good, there's nothing wrong with that. But can we give the Nuggets some respect? Because all series long it's been about the Clippers, and the Nuggets have finally pulled out not just one comeback from 3-1 down, two consecutive comebacks from 3-1 down, and I think they've earned a bit more respect than just being the team that dismantled the Clippers and the team that kind of falls off into the shadows as everyone talks about the Clippers and the choke job that they had. Because it wasn't just Kawhi Leonard and Paul George shooting terribly in the last game, which they did. They actually both had a pretty solid series. The reality is the Nuggets were just way better at moving the ball. They did well at defending Kawhi Leonard, particularly in the last game. They threw different bodies at him, different ideas at him. They did more than the Mavericks did. And they were just the better team. They had better ball movement all series long, particularly in the last 3 games. It was just stark, the contrast between Leonard or Paul George throwing up an isolation 3 or 2, and the Nuggets going back down the other end with Murray and Jokic finding good looks for their teammates or for themselves. That's just the difference in the series in the end, not about the Clippers being terrible, which I mean we can talk about that at a later date, but the Nuggets were pretty damn fantastic and they've done it 2 series in a row. Let's take it back to the middle of last season when I made a video centered around Nikola Jokic and why he is an MVP level player. And some people agreed with the notion that a player who runs the entire offense of a top seed in the West and a player that was running that offense while they had many injuries last year should be an MVP level consideration, but some people also kind of thought it was a nice idea, but Jokic would never be in the category as Kawhi Leonard, LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Kevin Durant, Stephen Curry, the list goes on. These are players with bigger names, bigger reputations, and they've done more in their career, particularly to this stage when it was Jokic's first season as an MVP level player. But people kind of dismissed him as that. They kind of thought he was an impactful player, but he'll never be the level of those guys. And this isn't me just saying this now. How many people at the time last year questioned whether the Nuggets had a number 1 option heading into the playoffs? Everyone I listened to, everyone I watched, that was the main criticism, that was the main concern. Oh, the Nuggets have a great team, they've got a good coach, but do they have a number 1 player? Do they have someone that can take over the game? And I'm sitting there like, this guy is right in front of you, someone that's dominated the whole regular season, someone that's unselfish, but he's still capable of putting up 30 points a game, putting up 30 and 15, or giving you a 20-point triple-double. He can do that any night of the week. But in their defense, we hadn't seen it. We hadn't seen it in the playoffs. Some people shrink in the playoffs, and you can understand that people were skeptical of whether this overweight 7-foot Serbian center would be able to dominate against the likes of LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard. But after 2 playoff series, 2 Game 7s, in which Jokic just dominated against the Spurs and the Trailblazers, you would have thought any of those question marks would have been put to bed. Sure, they didn't end up making the Western Conference Finals, they fell just short. But you would have thought any question marks surrounding whether Jokic could be the guy, not just a contending team, but a championship level team, would have been put to bed. This was a guy that just dominated every time and was the best player in 2 series in a row. And who knows if he would have been the best player against the Golden State Warriors. I mean, that's a stretch. But it's Jokic. I mean, he was putting up numbers that are only comparable to LeBron James, Wilt Chamberlain, and Oscar Robertson, and now probably Luka Doncic as well. But there was still skepticism. Who was willing to say Jokic is better than AD? Who was willing to say Jokic could outplay LeBron James over a 7-game series, or even Kawhi Leonard? I mean, we're yet to see if he'll outplay LeBron, but no one was willing to say this. I don't know, but give me someone that can hit 5 threes a game, pass out of double teams, score on anyone in the post, hit Dirk-type step-back 2s, name something on offense he can't do apart from posterize people, which I mean he's improved his dunking now, I wouldn't say it's posterizing, but you just can't name anything he can't do. Now, it took a year longer than it should have, but now people recognize him as the best center, and I expect in the next year, people might recognize him as close to the best player in the league, because for some reason, most NBA fans, NBA casuals, whatever you want to put it, are kind of a year late on trends. They'll hop onto Kawhi Leonard a year after he was the best player in the league during the Raptors run. They'll hop on Nikola Jokic a year after he was a top 5 player in the playoffs in 2019, now in 2020, and then they'll talk about how good he is in 2021. It's just the way it works. I don't know, don't ask me. But it shouldn't be surprising at this point in time. We've seen it for 28 games. We've seen it during the regular season, and we've seen him dominate even more in the playoffs. Did I personally expect him to outplay Kawhi Leonard in the playoffs? No, Kawhi was probably the only one of 2 players that I would have thought would have the upper hand over Jokic. That doesn't mean I was surprised that he did it. That's the key word. Everyone's shocked. Oh, Jokic is outplaying Kawhi Leonard. No, you shouldn't be shocked. Maybe you think Kawhi is a better player, but that doesn't mean you should be shocked that someone who's averaged 25, 10, and 7 on 50% shooting over 28 playoff games is going to outplay someone in any playoff series. Michael Jordan, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, I don't care. He's got a chance to do so because he's been that dominant. I'm not saying I expect him to do so, but he's got a chance to do so. And I expect him to outplay pretty much any players outside of LeBron James and Kawhi Leonard. And you can now tick Kawhi Leonard off the list because he's done that. Now it's LeBron James. Would I be surprised if he outplays him? No. I mean, just put him in the Eastern Conference. There's not one single player that comes close to him. Jason Tatum, Jimmy Butler, these guys are cold. These guys are great, even Giannis. But in terms of playoff performances, in terms of what he's doing, I'm not picking anyone to match what he's doing. But this Game 7, or this series as a whole, wasn't just about Nikola Jokic being one of the best players in the world and the best player in the series. It was about Jamal Murray turning up in the last 3 games of the series. Paul Millsap going on his little 10-0 run in Game 5, which if it never happened, the Nuggets would have lost in 5. Gary Harris slashing to the rim fantastically and making open threes, plus playing hard-nosed defense. Michael Porter Jr. coming up with a clutch 3 in Game 5 or 6, I don't remember, but it was clutch, and then coming up with some clutch rebounds and some clutch defensive plays all throughout the last 3 games. Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic are undoubtedly the duo of this team. They're undoubtedly the 2-star players. In these playoffs, they've been the second best pairing in the league behind LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and that's the matchup we're going to see. Because unlike a lot of other 2-star players, you can look at the Clippers as a prime example, Jokic and Murray are actually the definition of a duo. They literally have some kind of telekinetic connection. I don't know what it is, but a behind-the-back pass from Jokic or Murray always seems to end up in the shooting pocket of one of the other 2 that doesn't pass it. And they always seem to know where each other are. They have the connection that's built up over 4 or 5 years of running the offense through each other. And although Jokic came along a lot quicker than Murray, Murray is now starting to catch up, and they're both at that all-star level. Jokic is probably more at an MVP level. Murray has now established himself as an all-star level player, and when you have 2 players that know each other inside out, that sounds a bit weird, but you know what I mean. They know each other's game as well as any 2 players in the league. Now that Murray has come along and become an all-star level player, it's really an unstoppable 2-man combination when they're both on song, which seems to be way more often than not in these playoffs, and that's proven to be the key factor in the Nuggets now making the Western Conference Finals. And that's what we should be talking about, the Nuggets in the Western Conference Finals on the back of Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. It's not that hard. They're 2 great players. We have all off-season to talk about the Clippers, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, Doc Rivers, Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell, Rodney McGruder. I don't care who you want to talk about. We've got all off-season to do that. But right now we should be talking about the Nuggets because not only have they just come back from 3-1 2 games in a row, they're going to be playing the Lakers. And if I was the Lakers, I would have much preferred to play the Clippers. The Clippers don't move the ball like the Nuggets. The Clippers don't have an unguardable player in Nikola Jokic. There's been 3 unguardable players in these playoffs. One has been Anthony Davis, the second has been LeBron James, and the third has been Nikola Jokic. No one has been able to guard him. And then you could add Jamal Murray into the mix, particularly when the games are on the line, is where he thrives at the moment. And if he plays like he's played in elimination games from the get-go against the Lakers, there's every chance the Nuggets win. No one expected this team to come back from 3-1 down against the Jazz, and definitely not from 3-1 down to the Clippers, but they did it. And now for the 3rd time in a row, no one's expecting them to beat the Lakers. This is now 2 years in a row. The Nuggets have been a top seed in the West, and for the last 2 years, who has given them a chance in doing anything in the playoffs? I listen to a lot of podcasts, watch a lot of shows watch all of that stuff, read articles, whatever you want to say. Who's given the Nuggets a top seed with one of the best players in the league and an emerging point guard a chance in the playoffs either one of the last 2 years? They were one game short. They were inches away from going to the Western Conference Finals last year, and they've now made it this year. Yet people aren't going to give them a chance against the Lakers. They didn't give them a chance against the Clippers, and look where they are. So I think maybe you should start giving the Nuggets a chance, and maybe you should start respecting them and Nikola Jokic as a threat in the NBA, not just a young team that's kind of an easy pushover and an easy top seed to beat, because that's what a lot of people were talking about. That's what a lot of people were talking about in the Clippers series and have been talking about for the last 2 years. You know who you are. Yeah, the Clippers have issues, but this Nuggets team's legit, and I think people need to start respecting them a bit more, because it's quite frankly disrespectful to just talk about the Clippers when the Nuggets have come back from 3-1 twice in a row. But anyways, if you did enjoy the video, a like would be greatly appreciated. Trying to make this type of content like 5 to 6 times a week. Go the Nuggets. Joker for MVP. Murray's an all-star. Michael Porter Jr., Joker, Jokic in the future.